Segment 2, The Rise of Trade Empires. Please like, subscribe, and share right now. And so, we drift a little further forward. The ancient world has laid its foundations quietly and carefully beneath us. The coins have been minted. The trade routes mapped. The first agreements written into clay. And now, as centuries turn like the slow, gentle pages of a book, something bigger begins to stir. The world is waking up to the power of trade. It is the Middle Ages now, roughly between the 5th and 15th centuries, and across Europe and the Arab world, a new class of people is emerging. The merchant class. Men and women who built their lives not through conquest or inheritance, but through commerce. Through patience. Through the careful art of buying and selling. In the great cities of Venice, Florence, and Genoa in Italy, powerful merchant families began to accumulate enormous wealth. And with that wealth, came influence. Came power. Came a quiet reshaping of the world. The Medici family of Florence were perhaps the most famous of all. Beginning as wool traders, they grew their enterprise across generations until they became the most powerful banking family in all of Europe. Their story is a reminder that the greatest business empires are rarely built overnight. They are built slowly, steadily, one careful decision at a time. And it was banking that became the next great leap forward for business. In medieval Europe, the practice of lending money with interest had existed informally for centuries. But around the 12th and 13th centuries, formal banking institutions began to emerge. The word bank itself comes from the Italian word banca, meaning bench, because early money lenders would conduct their transactions sitting at benches in the marketplace. Simple, quiet, unassuming. And yet from those humble wooden benches, the entire modern banking system was born. With banks came a new problem to solve. Merchants traveling long distances to trade were vulnerable. Carrying large amounts of gold or silver across hundreds of miles was dangerous. Bandits lurked on every road. And so, the clever minds of medieval banking devised a solution. The Bill of Exchange. A written document that allowed a merchant to deposit money in one city and withdraw its equivalent in another. No gold changing hands. Northwest risk on the road. Just a piece of paper and an agreement built on trust. It was one of the earliest forms of what we now call a bank transfer. Let your mind rest on that for a moment. A piece of paper. A promise. And suddenly, the world of commerce could move faster than ever before. Distance was no longer the barrier it once was. Trade could flow. Business could breathe. As trade expanded across continents, nations began to realize that commerce was not just good for merchants. It was good for entire kingdoms. Governments began to take a deep and active interest in business. And in the 15th and 16th centuries, a powerful economic philosophy began to take hold across Europe. It was called Mercantilism. The belief that a nation's wealth and power were measured by how much gold and silver it accumulated, and that exports should always outweigh imports. Kings and queens became deeply invested in trade. They funded voyages. They chartered companies. They turned business into an instrument of empire. And it was from this era that one of the most consequential business inventions in all of human history quietly appeared. In the year 1600, Queen Elizabeth I of England granted a royal charter to a group of London merchants. They called themselves the East India Company. It was not the first trading company of its kind, but it would become the most powerful. At its peak, the East India Company controlled half of the world's entire trade. It had its own army, its own currency, its own laws. It was, in every sense of the word, a corporation with the power of a nation. But the East India Company did not rise alone. Just 2 years earlier, in 1598, Dutch merchants had formed their own ambitious venture. And in 1602, the Dutch East India Company, known by its Dutch initials as the VOC, was established. The VOC achieved something no business had ever done before. It issued shares to the public. Ordinary citizens could now invest in the company, own a small piece of it, and share in its profits. This was the birth of the world's first publicly traded company. And the exchange where those shares were bought and sold, the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, became the world's first official stock market. Settle into that thought gently. Ordinary people, for the first time, could own a piece of a business. The idea seems so familiar to us now. So ordinary. But in 1602, it was nothing short of revolutionary. For now, let the candlelit counting houses of Florence drift softly through your mind. The quiet scratch of a quill on a bill of exchange. The gentle creak of a merchant ship leaving Amsterdam harbor, its hold full of possibility. Business was growing up. And the world was growing with it. Please like, subscribe and share right now. Facts covered in Segment 2. 1. The merchant class rose to prominence in medieval Europe between the 5th and 15th centuries. 2. The Medici family began as wool traders before becoming Europe's most powerful banking dynasty. 3. The word bank derives from the Italian word banca, meaning bench. 4. The bill of exchange was invented in medieval times as an early form of secure money transfer. 5. Mercantilism became the dominant economic philosophy of 15th and 16th century Europe. 6. The East India Company was chartered by Queen Elizabeth I in 1600 and eventually controlled half of world trade. 7. The Dutch East India Company, VOC, was established in 1602. 8. The VOC became the world's first publicly traded company. 9. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange became the world's first official stock market.